Hello, I'm Robert Ewell, and this is the 15th session in my series on Genesis 1:26, being a good steward of God's kingdom, this world. Today I'm going to introduce you to a concept called Malthusian Economics, not something we normally would talk about, and then I'll explain to you why it's important, especially if you're engaged in the sustainability movement. But first, I promised I'd review a couple examples of helping people make good decisions. The first one is LED lighting versus fluorescent. If you're going to do it for your home, I would recommend LED lighting. It uses half the energy, it doesn't have any mercury in it, and you can get artistic designs like the chandelier that you see posted there. A lot of creativity being done right now with LED lighting. However, the first time I submitted a proposal to re-lamp a building with LED lighting, it got all the way to the chief financial officer. And he called me up and said, Robert, why are you recommending the option that has the worst payback? Because if we did fluorescent lighting with lighting controls, it would pay back sooner than it would by installing the LEDs. And I said, well, I picked the one that reduced the operating costs the most and has the biggest impact of operating expense, and that is the LED. It saves more energy, and therefore we save more money each year, and that reduces the operating cost. At that point, my computer pinged because he approved what I had recommended. I was speaking his language. It's all about reducing operating cost. Yeah, the LED was more expensive, but it saved significantly more money, and so it was the better choice long term for the company. The next one is really just for you. I had mentioned this earlier that the environmental impact of especially like electric vehicles is poorly understood. Everyone goes, well, you have no emissions from the tailpipe. It must be wonderful. But if we use my more simplistic metric, which is cost as environmental impact, we can compare just based on cost the different types of vehicles that are out there. So I did that for you. I'm not showing you all the calculations, but I looked at the cost of the vehicle, the cost of the fuel, the cost of maintenance, insurance. You get rebates, all of those sort of things for the 20-year typical life of a car. Now, you may not own the car 20 years, but it still has that environmental impact for whoever you sell it to. And so I'm just looking at the total cost. So if it's being rebated, you don't pay that cost, but it's still a cost as an environmental impact. So I would put the rebate cost back into the calculation. So the gasoline car runs about 65 cents. And this is in the state of California, which has a little more expensive gasoline. So it will vary by location in the world. The electrical vehicle is 70 cents. Whoa, why is that? Well, it's a much more expensive vehicle. And while I was very conservative in, you know, on how I calculated this thing, the batteries only last 10 years. And so you have to replace that. Depending on the electric vehicle, that can be anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 to replace that battery. That's a significant cost. Also, electric vehicles and compressed natural gas vehicles, they don't pay the taxes that keep the roads repaired or building new ones. And so I factored that cost back in because if everyone's driving an electric vehicle, we're all going to end up having to pay a special tax based on miles driven, typically is what you do. One would think a hybrid would be better than an electric vehicle. The problem is you have two technologies that has a higher maintenance cost on an electric vehicle. It still needs to replace the battery after 10 years, so you've got that cost. And so there are challenges with the hybrid. Even though it gets great gas mileage, it's a more expensive way of getting there overall. The winner was compressed natural gas. You used to be able to buy a Honda Civic that was already designed and built at the factory for compressed natural gas. Those are not done anymore. So it used to be better than this, 59 cents per mile. But I had to take what a retrofit kit cost, and that's about $10,000 cost added to the car. So you can still have a compressed natural gas car. They still make and sell in the United States vans and trucks because those are frequently bought by people who have a lot of trucks or vans, um, or even buses for that matter. You can buy city buses and stuff. A lot of them run on natural gas because it's so clean and they're trying to reduce their carbon footprint. For fun, I put my local commuter train. It's called the Smart Train. Um, it was really expensive to do. It doesn't run very far. It doesn't particularly run very fast. I think it averages about 25 miles an hour. But its cost per passenger mile is $3 per mile. It is way up there. And unlike a car, that's not doubling up, that's passenger miles. Some of the car cost, if you always drive with somebody with you, you just have your cost per mile per passenger. So the smart train is not smart. It has a huge environmental impact compared to other ways of transporting people, somewhere between, 4 to 6 times the environmental impact. And then the last one I just put in there for fun so that you could have as a comparison. There's been a lot of talk about having cars powered by hydrogen. Obviously burns with only water coming out the tailpipe. So this is viewed as, by many, as a great solution. We just need to develop the technology. The problem is that hydrogen is incredibly flammable. And so I gave you the safety criteria on the right there. Gasoline, you can have fires. Electric vehicles can have fires. Hybrids can have a fire either from the battery or the gasoline. So there's medium risk. Compressed natural gas is low risk. It's actually very difficult to ignite natural gas, and certainly incredibly challenging to even to do something as crazy as get it to explode. If you don't believe me, I recommend you watch the Mythbuster episode where they try and blow a building up with compressed natural gas. On the other hand, if they were doing the same thing with hydrogen, they would have had no trouble blowing the building up. Hydrogen is very dangerous gas. I've worked with hydrogen as part of my profession, and the efforts we had to go to put in safety systems, backups and checks and monitoring was substantial because hydrogen is, if you're not careful, not only will it burn, but it will explode and destroy things. So hope you've enjoyed this review here. Let's talk a little bit about Malthusian economics. Who is Malthus? He was an economist in the early 1800s. For his day, he was brilliant. And what he observed and argued for is that population grows exponentially. Whenever there's an excess in food, the population grows exponentially very quickly. However, we can only grow the food supply linearly. And so you get into the Malthusian trap. Every time we improve our ability to grow food with fertilizer, better farming techniques, modified crops, the population will just grow until it is checked by those limited resources. And then all you have is famine, war, and maybe big social programs to reduce the number of people back within what the food supply can support comfortably. History has determined that Malthus was an economic pessimist. By the way, all that I'm sharing here with you is you could see where I stole this from. This is right from Wikipedia. Nothing that I put here is not just cut and pasted from Wikipedia. The relevance today of Malthus, and this again is Wikipedia, they say he has been widely disapproved in developed countries with low birth rates, low child mortality, and high food production. This is what we see has happened. And that's true. All of the advanced nations, their birth rate is below replacement, even though they have an excess of food. And even countries that still have growing populations, the rate of growth is dropping. Currently, the world population is predicted to peak in, I think, about 6 or 7 years and then start to decline again, given current trends. But for the environmental movement, why is this important? Much of the environmental movement roots stem from Malthus economics. He said that there's not enough resources. We have diminishing resources. We have lack. The biblical worldview is that God has created a world which is abundant in resources, and like everything that he does, what he has given us is more than enough. We just need to learn to be good stewards of it, which has been much of what I've been sharing with you is how to be a better steward of what God has given us to manage. But when you work with people who are in the environmental movement, many of them are trapped in Malthusian economics, even if they don't know what it is. This is where ideas like we need to have zero population growth, we need to reduce the world's population down to as low as hundreds of thousands. These are all premised on what Malthus said, which is today a discredited theory. But you'll run into these tensions, so be prepared to gently address them as you go and try and be a good steward of God's world. I've got a couple more weeks where I'll be sharing these types of ideas with you. I look forward to seeing you next week. Till then, be a good steward.